kids, it's me, Toni HomePerm, back with another installment of Don't I Already Have That Palette? Yes, who can believe it? Another installment of Don't I Already Have That Palette? I wasn't expecting to do another one so soon, but there's been a slew of previews of new palettes coming out, and I said, let me hop on it right away and see what's coming out, go through my collection, and see if I have something that has a similar enough color story to this new palette. Most of this information I've gotten from Trend Mood on Facebook and Instagram, so by all means follow Trend Mood on all of their platforms. Okay, well, let me start by doing a little slidey slide so that I can put the palette up here that we're going to be talking about. Now, in my last installment of this video series, I was talking about the Morphe and Sour Patch Kids palette, and I said that I had two palettes in my collection very similar to it, the Chaotic Cosmetics Double Scoop and the Ruby May Pop Zombie palette. Turns out I have even more similar to it. The first one being a brand new palette to my collection. It is the Sensorium Chapter 1 by Alexis Stone in collaboration with Be Perfect. Let me get the mirror out of the way, and I'm going to show this to you here. And you can see I have all of those bright neon colors and some of the darker tones and the shimmery colors. Believe me, if that color story interests you, then I certainly suggest that you pick this palette up, and I'll leave a card up above to my review of this palette. But the Sensorium Chapter 1 wasn't the only palette I had that was similar to the Sour Patch Kids palette. I also have this little one, the Sugar Pill Fun Size palette, the first one. And here, look, you can see no shimmers in this, just the mattes, just these sort of neon pastel colors. I have this, so I certainly definitely don't need the Sour Patch Kids palette. Next on the list is the Jeffree Star Pricked palette, which is already out at this time. I don't own any Jeffree Star palettes, and I don't really intend to buy any at this point, but I'm not going to discuss anything about that. All I'm going to do is let you know this is a new palette release, and I looked at it and I said to myself, I know I already have palettes with that similar color story. And the first one is the Norvina Pro Pigment Palette Volume 3. And here it is in all its orange glory. Okay, I just want to hold that up so that the mirror isn't blinding you. But you can see I've got all the oranges and maroon brown tones that I could possibly need in this palette. So I'm good. This satisfies me. I certainly don't need the Pricked palette. But hold on, wait for it. It turns out the Norvina palette is not the only palette in my collection with all those orangey, brown, maroony tones. What do I have? A new palette in my collection, the Be Perfect Antidote palette. This is in the Carnival series. This is number 4 that they did in collaboration with Stacey Marie. And when we open her up and we look at these 3 columns right here, what do we have? Beautiful orangey, brown, maroon, gold tones. And yes, there's even one more. If you really are crazy about orange, well, here you go. ColourPop Orange You Glad. Aren't you glad that I told you about this palette? Yes, one of the ColourPop neutrals, but here you go. It's all the orange that you could ever want. And between the palettes that I already have, I have more orange than I could ever possibly use in a lifetime. So I certainly don't need the pricked palette. Now, in the last installment, I was talking about the new Glamlite Dirty Martini palette. At that time, I didn't know it was part of an entire collection of 4 palettes, the Dirty Martini palette only being one of the 4. Now, in my last video, I compared the Dirty Martini palette to my Moonslice Beauty Emerald palette, and also I have a little Wet n Wild Halloween palette. I think that's called Mummy of the Year. Both had similar color stories to the Dirty Martini palette. But with a recent addition to my collection, I found I have a palette similar to the Dirty Martini palette again. And what a surprise! We're back to the Antidote palette. However, this time, we're looking at these 3 columns on the end, the green tones. Very, very similar to the Dirty Martini palette. Even with those sort of lime colors, the deep greens, the shimmers. So I'm good. I'm good. I don't need the Dirty Martini palette. And I found another palette similar in color story to the Dirty Martini palette. The little Huda Beauty Emerald Obsessions. Here it is. Very similar in color story, very compact. I've used this palette quite a bit. It's a good palette. It's a good green palette. So I don't need the Dirty Martini palette. I already have a color story similar to it. Now, moving on to some of the other palettes in this new Glamlite Happy Hour collection. Starting with the Chocolate Martini palette, I looked at that and I said, don't I already have that palette? And sure enough, my Kaleidos Sashimi palette, I think this is Futurism number 7, and you can see when I open it up, I have a very similar color story to the Chocolate Martini palette. The brown tones, gold shimmer, a deeper brown, and I love the Kaleidos formula. So if I have a hankering for a chocolate martini, I'll grab my sashimi palette. Chocolate martini and sashimi. It doesn't sound like they would go together good. Okay, next in the Glamlite Happy Hour collection is the wine palette, which is that purple palette. Strange, because wine, when I think of wine, I think more of red than purple, but whatever, that's just me. So I looked at it, it's a beautiful color story. I said to myself, don't I already have that palette? And what do we have? Another in the Norvina Pro Palette series, number 1. So when we open this up, and here we have it, my pink and purple color story, very reminiscent of the wine palette. So there we have it in my Norvina Pro Pigment Palette Volume 1, a color story very similar to the Glamlite wine palette. So I don't need to order the wine palette. Now last in the series is the Margarita palette, and yeah, this one. Okay, as soon as I looked at that one, I said, yeah, I think I already have that palette, and I think I already have it from Glamlite. My Cake palette. Now when we take a look at the Cake palette, I get a very similar vibe to the Margarita palette. The yellows, the orange, the pinks, the purples, the shimmers, not exactly the same. The Margarita palette looks somewhat brighter than the Cake palette, but to me the color story is very, very similar. So I'm like, I definitely don't need the Margarita palette. I've got similar enough colors in the Cake palette. Sorry, Glamlite, but you already put it out. And I do have one more in my collection similar to the Margarita palette, It's the Ruby May Pop Zombie palette. This one, she pops up a lot. She pops up a lot. But here you go. Very similar colors. Those sort of bright pastel neon tones. Very similar to the color story in the Margarita palette. A bit more condensed, but when you're doing a look, how many colors do you really need? Especially when you're doing a bright and colorful look. Well, I guess I'm the last person to say that. Don't read me. Next on the list is a new Morphe x Jaclyn Hill collaboration, the Divine Neutrals palette. Yeah, so I sort of was like, okay, I've got to go into like my more boring palettes for this one. But okay, it's a boring palette, but it's not. It's done well. It's done well. So my Kaleidos Futurism 2, the Cyber Bronze. Let me open it up. Get the mirror out of the way, and there we have it. All the neutrals that I need. It does tend to go a little bit reddish here with that color, but for me that's what makes it a great palette. For me, this is what a Divine Neutrals palette should be, so I'm good. I definitely don't need that Morphe palette, and if you've ever used any of the Kaleidos palettes, you know what great quality they are. So I'm happy with this, and this is the one I'll be using if I want a look that you could create with the Divine Neutrals palette. Next is the by Terry Bonjour Paris palette. I believe that's what it's called, although I may be mistaken. It may say something like Terribly Paris on the palette itself. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's a new by Terry palette, Paris palette, and as soon as I saw it, well, I knew I wasn't gonna order that palette. I was not gonna be buying that palette. But as soon as I looked at it, I said, "Oh, I know I have that palette. I know I have that palette." And sure enough, I had received many moons ago in a BoxyCharm box, and I no longer have BoxyCharm. This Tarte Rainforest of the Sea Volume 3. Beautiful packaging, okay? But Rainforest by the Sea, I mean, does anything about that say rainforest or sea to you? It doesn't to me. But look at this color story. It's almost exactly the same as that by Terry Paris palette. Very shimmery, very neutral, very tannish, beige-ish, boring-ish. I'm sorry, it's just not a color story for me. I've never used this palette. I don't think I've ever even swatched it. But I mean, it's cute packaging. This is why I don't declutter things, because I figure at some point I'll pull something out and I can use it as an example in a video. And so there you have it. Okay, next on the list, and I have to admit this was a little disappointing. It's the Lunar Beauty Moonspell Volume 2. Now, I have the Moonspell Volume 1, and I love that palette. I think the packaging is just beautiful. One of the most beautiful packaged palettes in my collection, and I really like the color story. But when I saw the Volume 2, I don't know, I just wasn't as excited about it. It just seems like it's the same packaging, just made red. I know there's some changes to the artwork, but it just, for some reason, it just didn't grab me. And the color story, I was a little meh about, and I said, I probably already have something similar. And I looked in my collection, and sure enough, starting with the Zodiac Cosmetics Sagittarius palette, I opened it up, and It's actually, the packaging itself is similar with the gold. And, you know, we have the pinky purples and the maroons and the shimmers. So to me, it looked very similar to the color story of the Moonspell too. So I was like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need the Moonspell too. But it's a beautiful palette. I mean, if you really like that packaging and the color story, I would have to say, you know, order it. Get the palette. It just didn't do it for me. I also found in my collection, similar to the Moonspell Volume 2, my Colored Rain and Power palette. When we look at this, again, a very similar color story, pink, purple, maroon, and this Colored Rain palette is great. The pigmentation is just off the charts. It's a great little palette. So I said, okay, you have this. You don't need the Moonspell Volume 2. And I even found a third one with a similar enough color story. My Be Perfect Carnival 3, the Love Tahiti palette. When we look at this one, the pinks and purples and maroon colors, they're all in there. So I have a palette with very similar tones to the Moonspell Volume 2. So again, I don't need to order the Moonspell Volume 2. But like I said, it's a beautiful palette. I have the Volume 1. I love it. So if the Moonspell Volume 2 really grabs you, get it. Next on the list is from a UK indie brand called Jolie Beauty. I think that's how you pronounce it. Jolie Beauty? I'm not positive. They released some promo info on this Vampirism palette. It's a beautiful palette. The color story looked very intriguing to me, and I do love palettes from indie brands. But I said to myself, well, wait before you know, go and order a palette, especially from the UK, and have to pay for all that shipping. If I have anything in my collection that I can say, don't I already have that palette? And I do. So it's the Be Perfect again. There's a lot of Be Perfect palettes in this installment. This is the Carnival 2, the XL Pro, and when I opened her up, I said, yeah, I have a lot of similar colors as far as the dark purples and reds, and even going into some of the greens and the neutrals. And oddly enough, this is also a palette from the UK. But this is a great palette. I love this palette. So I said, no, I guess I'm gonna pass on the Vampirism palette for now. I have enough similar colors in this palette to make a look that I could probably make with that palette. So I found a smaller palette that has a capsulized color story similar to the Vampirism palette, and it is, oh, everything's falling out of it, the Alyssa Edwards collaboration palette with ABH. And here we go. So, Alyssa, please. Purples and reddish and maroon and some neutrals, dusty rose, got a great black, got a great white. This is a great palette. I said it's a condensed version of that, but I think it would give me similar vibes, similar looks to anything I could create with the Vampirism palette. So again, that's two palettes in my collection, similar to the Vampirism palette, so I'm good. I calmed myself down. I don't need to order it. Okay, so Midas Cosmetics is re-releasing their flower palette. I believe it used to have glitters in it. They took the glitters out and have repackaged it, I guess. I don't have the original. So I saw that and I looked at it and I said, I'm sure I have something similar to it. And it's one we've already seen, the Sugar Pill Fun Size. There you have it. Very similar color story. So I was like, I definitely don't need it. Thought I was done, but no, I did find another one, the Menagerie Pastel Pop Palette. It's a very similar color story to the flower palette, so I'm good. I don't need to order the flower palette. Okay, next on the list, this is another one of those big Makeup Revolution collab releases where there's just so much stuff. Okay, so here we have it. All these Makeup Revolution X Matrix palettes. Why they have to do so many, I don't get either. I mean, anyway, let's start with the first one, which is this neutral palette. And I looked at that and I said, well, first of all, I was like, it doesn't interest me, but I'm sure I must have picked something up along the way similar to it. So, what did I find in my collection? Believe it or not, it was something I found at Walmart. It's the Love Betsy by Betsy Johnson palette. And when you look at this color story, it's very similar to that Matrix neutral palette. Very neutrally, but with a little bit of pink and maroon, sort of an olive greenish, and blue, and the darker sort of gray silver. So I was like, close enough. This is close enough. Not that I was getting that palette anyway, but even more so, I have something like it. You're gonna love this. I really went into the depths of pulling out stuff in my collection. So another palette I have similar to that neutral palette is this CoverGirl Rain palette. I ever bought this? I don't know. It was an idea for a video, I guess. But when we look at this, the color story, it's very similar to that. Very neutrally with a little bit of pop of color. And I'm sure most of you out there watching this have palettes similar to that. There's so many palettes, neutral with just a little bit of pop of color. So, okay, now the green Matrix palette, I looked at that and I said, okay, what do we have similar? And another Norvina Pro palette, volume 2. So when we open her up, and there we have it, and there is enough similar tones in this to that Makeup Revolution green palette for me. So I'm good. And let's be honest, the quality of these palettes, these Pro Pigment palettes, are way better than Makeup Revolution any day of the week. There's some Makeup Revolution stuff that's okay, but it's very hit or miss. These Norvina palettes, very high quality. I've used them and never had any issues. Very pigmented, very blendable. So, okay, I'm good. I don't need that Matrix green palette. Now this big, take the blue pill, take the red pill. I looked at that. I was like, no. I was like, no. I know I already have that palette. And I'm not even going to bother to show you. But you can see, with all the Norvina palettes that I have, I mean, I could put those together and I have that take the blue, take the red palette, or my Be Perfect palettes. There's so many palettes I have that can dupe that color story. So I didn't think it was even worth holding anything up right now, but no. Don't I already have that palette? Yes, I already have that palette. Okay, another Makeup Revolution collab, this time with The Simpsons for Halloween, the Treehouse of Horror collection. And what did we find? Okay, so now the very big palette, the colorful one. Well, I looked at it and I said, you know what? I already have a Makeup Revolution palette that has a close enough color story. My Terry and NYX Revolution, the Tropical Carnival. Okay, there we go. All those bright colors, very similar to the big Treehouse of Horror, but more condensed. And I'm sure some of these are, it's Makeup Revolution. I'm sure some of these are exactly the same as what's in that palette. So definitely wouldn't buy that other palette. Also in my collection, an indie palette that has a very similar color story. My Playing in Makeup by Yolanda, the Jamrock palette, a beautiful palette. I love this because also it's an indie palette. The brand is created by it's a black-owned indie makeup company, and this palette has incredible pigmentation, incredible blendability. It's a beautiful palette, and I definitely would choose this over that Makeup Revolution palette any day of the week. And yeah, I found even one more, pains me to say it, the NYX, the Ultimate Brights palette. I remember for the longest time, this was about the only bright palette anywhere that you could find. And now it's like you walk into a makeup store or you go online and there's just a million of them everywhere. But this is, you know, I think this is sort of like the OG rainbow palette. And bought it, I don't know, for the longest time I held off on buying it. And then finally I did buy it and never used it. I have so many other rainbow palettes that are so much better than this. So I should do something with it, because for the longest time, like I said, this was like the rainbow palette. If you wanted a rainbow palette, this was like the only one to get. Okay, two of the smaller palettes in the collection. There's a Lisa palette, and I looked at that and I said, oh, I know I have something similar to that. And something else I got in a BoxyCharm. This Violet Voss Essentials palette, and here we go. And you can see it's very similar to that Lisa palette. Neutrally, a little bit orangey, a little bit reddish, a little bit green, the darker color. So yeah, I'm like very similar color story. So I don't need the Lisa palette. Don't need the Lisa palette. I have to say though, I do love The Simpsons. I always loved the Treehouse of Horror, but no, I can't do it. I can't do it. Okay, the last in that collection, there's a Bart palette where he's Bart as the Raven. I remember that. I think that was one of the very first Treehouse of Horror specials that they did. Bart was the Raven going, nevermore, nevermore. So I looked at that palette. I said, do I have something similar? Yeah, and something else that I got in BoxyCharm. I don't think I've ever used it. It's a pure Midnight Masquerade palette, and here we go. And you know, it's neutrally, but a little bit corally, a little bit purpley, a little bit olivey, bluish. So I said, yeah, this one maybe not that really close to that Bart palette, but for me, I said, yeah, close enough, because the color story really didn't interest me anyway. I've never used this one, so why would I think I was even going to use the Bart one? Okay, here we have it, the Hot Topic Coraline palette. So I looked at that and I said, do I have anything similar to that? Sure enough, I do. From C Color, the Blue Sky palette, which is actually a dupe for the Jeffree Star Blue Blood palette. But that Coraline palette, the main focus of it, it's sort of bluish and sort of yellowish. And when I look at this palette, I get similar enough vibes to that color story. So I can look at this, I can look at the Coraline palette, and I can say, okay, we're good. We have a palette like that. I don't need that palette. Okay, and I have two new palettes that I'm going to show you. First is a series. Glossier came out with these little monochrome palettes, and there's like 3 colors in the pan. Why would you do like a little palette with 3 colors? And the way they have it set up is weird. I mean, they could have actually fit 4 in that. But whatever. So they've got these little trios. All look very neutral, all look very the same to me. And MAC has come out with this haute couture starring Rosalie. I'm assuming she's a beauty influencer. And I just looked at all of that and I was like, oh, well, it's not me. You know, those very neutrally palettes. I know a lot of people love them. It's not me. So I'm just, you know. But I said, don't I already have those palettes? And yeah, and a lot cheaper. So sure enough, I remembered I had picked up from Walmart a bunch of these new little Wet n Wild quads. You know, I mean, I've got every neutral color and tone that I could ever need with these. You know, and these are very inexpensive. I think they're under like $5 or something. And I said, okay, I have these. I certainly don't need any of those. Not that I was ever planning on buying any of them. Okay, the last one, finally. It's this NYX Money Heist palette. And I looked at that and I was like, it's so like light and shimmery and neutral, but it does remind me of something in my collection. Now this is an oldie. I was digging in the depths. I had to really dig out in the drawers of my palette collection. Bad Habit, which is no longer a company, although I think a lot of the people that worked there are now at Alter Ego. Bad Habit, you may remember, they did a lot of the Huda Beauty dupe palettes and a lot of the Pat McGrath dupe palettes. This one wasn't a dupe palette, Midsummer Night palette, and as soon as I pulled it out and I looked at it, I said, oh, yeah, that looks a lot like that NYX palette. Very light, neutrally, very shimmery, just some slight pops of color. So I was like, yeah, I have that palette. I'm good. Okay, well there we have it, all the palettes that I don't need to buy because as I said to myself, don't I already have that palette? And yes, Toni, you do have that palette or something close enough. Now, let me just say to everyone, I'm not telling anybody not to buy a palette. If any of these new palettes that I've shown you, if you see it and you're taken with it and you love the color story and you say, I've got to have that palette, I want that palette, by all means, buy the palette. I'm not telling anyone not to buy anything that they really want. As I've always stated, I do these videos as an exercise for myself to prove to myself that I don't need to buy this palette because I already have something similar enough to it in my own collection. I just wanted to take a second just to thank all of the new subscribers that I've been getting lately. I can't say thank you enough to everybody. It means the world to me when people subscribe to my channel, and it's very uplifting and motivating to me. It makes me want to keep creating new content and keep doing things. So again, just thank you very much. Remember, you can always follow me here on my channel. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of these videos, please hit the subscribe and the notification bell. You can also catch me twice a month on my Naughty or Nice internet variety show that I do with legendary New York City drag queen, Alexis Flame. That info will be down below. I also have my God'll Get You for That Walter podcast that I do with my good friend Tom Cat, and that has its own YouTube channel, and it streams on all the podcast platforms. I'll leave all that information down below as well. Again, thank you for tuning in, and I can't wait to see you all again in my next video. Bye-bye.